It's time to learn about the job of the president. First, how does one qualify to be the President of the United States? The answer is you must be a natural-born citizen, at least 35 years of age, and have resided in the United States for at least 14 years. The 14 years, however, do not have to be right before you run for office. Most presidents reach the White House through the electoral process. Some, however, became president because of presidential assassination. It wasn't until the death of President William Henry Harrison that it dawned on the country that we had no constitutional provision on what to do when the president dies in office. So the tradition began. The vice president succeeds the president if he died in office. It wasn't until the passage of the 25th Amendment that the official line of succession was established. According to the 25th Amendment, if the president dies in office, the next in line is the vice president, then the Speaker of the House, the President pro tem of the Senate, the Secretary of State, and the last of the cabinet members in order of creation. All of the cabinet members in order of creation. That means that the Department of Homeland Security, the last department created, that person is actually in line to become president. If a president is incapacitated and temporarily unable to perform his duties, the president can either inform Congress in writing, or a majority of the cabinet and vice president can inform Congress that the president is unable to perform his presidential duties. What about impeachment? We have talked in length about the process, but for a reminder, the House of Representatives issues articles of impeachment. The Senate tries the case, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court presides over the trial. What about the politics of impeachment? Removing a president during the end of a term is a difficult task. Also, what is an impeachable offense? The Constitution allows the House of Representatives to impeach an official for treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. What exactly is a high crime? The only presidents to be impeached but not convicted were Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton. President Johnson was impeached for violating the Tenure of Office Act, and Clinton was impeached for perjury and obstruction of justice. Could it be argued that either president was impeached because of politics? Let's talk about that idea in next class. The constitutional powers of the president are explained in Article 2, and it reads, "The executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America." The Constitution says little else about presidential authority. The idea of institutional balance was very important to the delegates at the Constitutional Convention. As a result, the insistence of balance, the president can do little on his own, and he shares his power with the other two branches of government. Of the constitutional powers the president does have, his national security powers are those that he has almost alone. For example, the president has the following powers. He alone is commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He can make treaties with other nations, but that power is subject to the agreement of 2/3 of the Senate. He can also nominate ambassadors, again with the agreement of the majority of the Senate. And last, he can receive ambassadors of other nations, thereby conferring diplomatic recognition on their governments. The legislative powers include giving the State of the Union address, recommending legislation to Congress, convening both houses of Congress in cases of emergency, adjourning Congress if the House and Senate don't agree, and vetoing legislation. Administrative duties include executing or enforcing laws, appointing officials with the consent of the Senate, requesting written opinion from administrative officials, and filling vacancies during congressional recesses. The President also has judicial powers. The President can grant reprieves and pardons for all federal offenses except impeachment. Finally, the President can appoint federal judges and justices with the consent of the Senate. As you can tell from the previous slide, many of the powers of the President are not explicitly in the Constitution. Two of the powers identified in the Constitution is the President's power as Commander-in-Chief and the power to execute laws passed by Congress. They are ambiguous and open to interpretation. I will give you several readings during class where you can examine areas that allow the President to expand his power. As for now, let's look at public opinion perception in the relationship to presidential power. The President is able to leverage power over Congress if he has a mandate. Also, if his approval ratings are high, he can use that as well. When we get to class, we will discuss the idea of the first 100 days of a president's term. However, public opinion of presidential power should not be exaggerated. In a 1990 survey, 31% believed that the Supreme Court was more powerful than the President, and 21% endorsed the opposite position. The President cannot run the country by himself, so he has a supporting cast. The White House office, the executive office of the President, the Cabinet, and various agencies and commissions help the President govern. The White House staff contains the President's closest assistants and advisors. Many of the people who are part of the staff worked on the President's campaign. These assistants and advisors do not need Senate approval to get their jobs. The President's cabinet consists of cabinet secretaries, independent agencies, commissions, and judges. When I mention judges, I don't necessarily mean the Supreme Court judges. I mean judges that sit on various commissions and agencies. Independent agency heads have a fixed term and can be removed for just cause only. Executive agency heads serve at the pleasure of at the President's pleasure, though their appointments must be confirmed by the Senate. What that means is that any day a president can come in and he can request a resignation or fire a cabinet agency head. He does not have to give a reason. Also, judges can only be removed by impeachment. So a president cannot impeach a judge, although he can appoint a judge. Who does the president appoint? Most presidents know few of their appointees personally. Keep in mind, the president appoints around 4,000 jobs, and 1,000 of those jobs require Senate approval. This flowchart illustrates the structure of the executive office of the president. Although the agency heads must have Senate confirmation, they all report directly to the president. One agency I would like to point out is among the most powerful. That is the Office of Management and Budget. This office is responsible for assembling the budget that the president delivers to Congress. The office also helps develop reorganization plans and reviews legislative proposals of agencies. The executive office also has three major policy-making bodies, which include the National Security Council and the Council of Economic Advisors. The third agency, which I mentioned before, is the Office of Management and Budget. This slide lists the 15 cabinet members that are part of the executive branch. The cabinet consists of 14 secretaries and the Attorney General. The President can appoint less than 1% of employees in all departments. So that means most of the work is done by bureaucrats, which are not appointed by the President. And our next chapter after this will deal with the bureaucracy. From time to time, however, the President can appoint other officials, such as ambassadors to the United Nations, as well as cabinet members. Oh, wait, no, let me rephrase, excuse me. From time to time, the President can appoint other officials to be part of the cabinet. Sometimes presidents elevate the ambassadors to the United Nations to be part of the cabinet. For the most part, cabinet heads are often more concerned with defending the mission of their department, and their wants for their departments might conflict with the president's agenda. As a result, the president sometimes relies more on the White House office staff and the executive office for advice. The White House staff includes the key aides to the president, and he sees them daily. This group consists of the chief of staff, congressional liaison, press secretary, national security advisor, and other administrative political assistants that the president deems to be important. Each president relies heavily on their staffs for information, policy options, and analysis. In addition, each president organizes the White House to serve his own political and policy needs, as well as his decision-making style. Other than presiding over the Senate and breaking ties, what exactly does a vice president do? Well, according to the 25th Amendment, which we talked about earlier, he assumes the presidency if the president dies while in office, and he also helps to determine presidential disability. Besides the constitutional responsibilities, the vice president can be somewhat symbolic. He can be chosen to reward an important constituency or to balance the presidential ticket. The role of modern-day presidents depends on how the president chooses to use him. Some presidents use the vice president's input when making policy decisions and they use him as a diplomat. Other presidents don't use their vice presidents much at all. It depends on the president. This slide lists the legislative role of the president. You should be familiar with all but the line item veto, which we will discuss next class. Don't forget to write your questions for the quiz.